How's it going, everyone? I'm Nick, and you are listening to episode 6 of RSA Radio. This episode is brought to you by the Elite Guard, a force of duelists from various academies and clans who protect the future of the Duel Finder System for everyone in the community. Their newest member this month is Dackle. To enlist in their ranks, simply use the link in the description below. Thank you to all members of the Elite Guard for your monthly support. It is July 6th, 2018, and in today's podcast, I will have on someone who I consider to be one of the founding fathers of the lightsaber combat community, as we know it today. Darth Nonymous is the co-creator of the Terra Prime Light Armory and the Terra Prime Lightsaber Academy. His YouTube channel now has almost 24,000 subscribers, and his program is designed mostly to train instructors who can go on to create their own schools. And I'm happy to say that even though we disagree on a few things, we both had a great time. Because Darth Nonymous has so much more experience relative to the rest of us newer academies, I thought all of you listening might enjoy a discussion on the mysterious origins of our favorite sport, the current state of the community, and what may be the future we can all expect. I think the second half of the interview is the most interesting, as Nonymous goes over some of the hurdles new students and group leaders run into, and gives some great advice. In our discussion, several other community leaders and organizers come up. I would like to give an open invitation to all of you academy and group leaders out there to come on this program, especially if you have come up in a previous discussion, since there are, of course, two sides to every story. Now, I understand that there are strong opinions and some friction between some groups and sabersmiths out there, and that makes a lot of sense to me. For many of us, the support we receive from our students is our only income. It appears that our shared hobby attracts highly competitive and creative entrepreneurs. We all, more or less, follow a few patterns often found in the brick-and-mortar dojo model, being protective of our proprietary programs, attacking the validity of rival programs, and so on. Call me a hippie, but I don't care much for picking sides or holding anyone's curriculum under a magnifying glass. In fact, I've seen some great things taught by my so-called rivals, and if I had it my way, you all would be able to have access to all of our programs so that you will never run out of ways to refine your craft, enabling you to ever improve every day. The way I see it, we can all learn something from each other. A student of two schools will always have the advantage over a student of just one of our schools. In the true spirit of swordsmanship, even masters should be open to further knowledge and refinement. Some of us have been competing in kendo, fencing, or martial arts for decades, but deep down, we are all still students. Obi-Wan Kenobi, after bravely serving the Republic in countless battles and defeating Darth Vader, was still pulled over by Yoda and told that he still needed training. I think that is a good model that we can follow. At the same time, many of you at home are practicing and learning from the videos I have produced. I also continue to train and learn behind the scenes. As academy leaders and masters, we should all be careful not to let overconfidence become a critical weakness. The reverse is also true. If you are starting your own club or academy, you will sooner or later be met with criticisms from some of our community members. They may believe that there are only a few students out there and attempt to discourage you in order to claim a greater slice of the pie. The truth is, more people are learning of and joining our sport all the time. Since our last episode, for example, the number of duelists on the Duel Finder map has shot past 200 and is quickly approaching 250. If you have something good, stand up for it, promote it. If you are not sure if a particular lesson will be useful to a student, be honest about that. But the one thing we all don't need is to tell our students that another program is totally worthless. I think that we need to trust our students. If we train them right, they will be able to glean the good and useful lessons from every school they encounter. The key is to spar and duel frequently, and to keep only that which makes you stronger. For those of you who have not yet enjoyed last month's episode, Matt Mon from Bendu Lightsaber Combat came on to chat about the 7 Jedi forms, and how the fictional fighting styles of Force wielders can be translated into viable combat philosophies. It was a lot of fun, so be sure to check it out. I will add the link in the description below, or you can search the 7 Jedi Forms with Bendu Lightsaber Combat RSA Radio Episode 5 to pull up the video. In this video's description, you'll also find a list of this episode's topics, where you may use time codes to jump to the parts you want to hear most. Super quick, just before I bring on Darth Nonymous, I have so much exciting news to share about the most recent improvements to RogueSaber.com. I'll make it quick, but if anyone out there would like to learn more about any of these updates, commenting below or using the contact page on the website will give you a chance to ask me anything you'd like directly. To start off, I have an announcement to everyone in the community. For the past couple of months, the Governing Council of the Rogue Saber Academy has been working on a new and improved version of our standard sport rules. We have taken inspiration from combat saber groups around the world, and also from the formal rules of kendo, Olympic fencing, and several martial arts. We are close to publishing something that I believe will be extremely useful to the community, and that is a flexible and neutral third option that many members of different groups may use in inter-organizational competitions. True, we all have our own individual rules, but this will be something that many of us can use in events where our different programs overlap. It will also be useful to duelists who don't have any group affiliation. We want to take the best of what everyone has discovered in their own groups, academies, and clubs, and work that into something from which we all may benefit. If you would like to contribute to this project and have your voice heard, feel free to contact the RSA. The RSA is now all over social media. Check out the links at the bottom of most pages of RogueSaber.com to find us on Facebook, Twitter, Minds.com, Reddit, Google+, Pinterest, and more. Would you like to claim account points, dual credits, and move up our worldwide leaderboard? It is now easier than ever to report on past events with our new follow-up form. It now takes only under a minute to fill out that form on your phone, and works even for unplanned, unscheduled, and spontaneous spars and duels. Some of you have been asking for that for months, so I'm happy that we can bring it your way. If you haven't yet joined a home group, get on the map and select one, because soon every group in the Duel Finder system will have its own group page. This will be a hub where you can connect with other group members, see announcements and events created by your group leader, and more. If you would like to host a tournament, I am pleased to announce that we have a brand new and improved phone-friendly tournament creation form and organizer packet. But the awesome part is that we also now host a unique page for your tournament that you can share on social media where people in and outside the RSA may sign up to compete. The system will automatically invite all duelists in your area, sort your participants into tournament brackets and single elimination or double elimination depending on what you would like, and update those brackets as you report on who wins each match. No paperwork required. You will even have access to certificates you can present to your winners with codes to unlock dual credits and other prizes. If you would like to let everyone know about a major event in the community, we now also have a way that you can do that by posting a link to the event displayed just above the Duel Finder map. And now, because I listen to you guys and I'm working all the time to make the Duel Finder system work better as a social network connecting our community, we now allow you to specify the armor class you will be using as you invite duelists around you to spars, duels, and tournaments. There are 3 classes. Light, where you'll be working mainly with a cup and gloves. Medium, that requires a fancy mask and padded gloves. And heavy, that includes body armor, throat protection, knee pads, and more. Now, for all the matches you schedule, all participants will know exactly how much armor to bring. In this month's Clan Wars update, I'm happy to say that my clan, the Guardians, is challenging the lead of the Keepers of Balance. Guardian of Winds has joined the light side. Now, as I've had the chance to talk with more of you around the world, I've learned that most of your academies also have light side and dark side clans. I see an awesome opportunity here. If any of you listening are interested, the RSA can produce sew-on and iron-on patches with our non-copyright infringing logos for the light, dark, and the gray, so that you can represent your side of the force by adding it on your uniform, robes, armor, gloves, and so forth. I think it would be so cool if we could use the same symbols in different schools so that we can recognize our brothers from across the community at tournaments and conventions and easily identify our rivals. What do you guys think? Let me know below. If there is an interest in clan patches, I'd be happy to make it happen. And now, my conversation with Darth Nonymous. And I'm now on with Darth Nonymous. Now, to start off, I really like that name, Darth Nonymous. Do you fight with light side or the dark side? Where did that name come from?
Well, the name actually came from a Halloween costume I did, which was just a mashup of Darth Vader and the V for Vendetta mask. Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was just. And to be honest, it was just. It started out as a handle for all the forums and stuff like that. So.
Now, just before we started the recording, you said you were Skyping all the way, or actually using Google Plus, all the way from Michigan. But you also have schools in New York and in France. Can you tell us a little bit about that reach before we get into the main questions?
We have a school with one of our knights in Syracuse, New York, the Gathering of Sabers, which teaches our system there. Also in Ithaca, which is kind of related to that. That's more of an enclave, so you learn more of the kind of beginner stuff at that group. Then we have, but we have members kind of all over. We've got people in Tennessee and out in, we've had people in Canada and we still have people in Canada, of course, but we have in France right now. We've got a fairly big following. One of our knights has been working with the French Federation of Fencing and has worked with them to come up with a national lightsaber dueling system, tournament system. So, and they had their first national meet last week, the week before, something like that. So that's going very well over there.
That's pretty awesome. But I had no idea that you had that kind of outreach and the program is spread. That's pretty awesome. As far as you can tell, how did this all get started? Who sparked the transition between kids in their backyard with lightsabers to toys to the academies, tournaments, and intense competition that we see today? I'd really want to know what you have to say because you're the guy who knows this stuff. You've been in the sport longer than most of us, I'd say.
I'm not actually the oldest denizen of the community. We came in a little bit after its beginning. A guy, and we actually have a video, a show where we did this last year about the history of sabering. And we had a guy on named Greg Ember, who is probably the foremost historian of this particular activity. And he has been following it and researching it and has traced it back to, I think, the earliest group that he's found. He says this on our show was in Russia in 2003. They were just using broom handles and, painted them red and green. So there is some smatterings in like the early 2000s of stuff kind of happening. He's probably, he's obviously the authority on it, but what he says and what he says on the show is that probably around the time that the Force effects and the polycarbonate blade lightsabers and cosplay lightsabers came out is when people started taking this elsewhere. In the U.S., the thing that really sparked the community here, the thing that, there'd been people playing with it before, but the thing that kind of started it off with was in New York with a group called New York Jedi. They performed in a parade, in the Halloween parade there, and they got people asking for classes. They started doing classes, and they've been doing it ever since. They have since changed their name to Rogue Academy or Rogue something, and they are they're still operating. And actually, one of their members, Craig Page, is one of our lore masters. So actually, our lore master. Where it got started, I'm not exactly sure. Where it got started here in the United States and what we kind of see as the community now probably got started with a forum called Saber Wars, which was operated by the New York Jedi primarily, but it was really a network for like different groups to get together and talk about things and, and all this stuff. And so that's really what kind of spread it around the country. When we came on the scene in 2012, it had already kind of been established a little bit. When we got into it, it was the New York Jedi were kind of established. There was already two kind of schools established. There was the West Coast and the East Coast kind of things. Out in the West Coast, you had a lot of stuff that was based on two guys, Nova Star and Kane. They basically put out a bunch of DVDs which were for lightsaber combat choreography. And so you had a lot of following over there. You had a lot of following over on the New York side, which is that. And then through Saber Wars, you got kind of like in the middle. People started groups started popping up, everywhere. At that point, it was pretty much choreography. So it's not fighting, not free fighting or anything like that.
To recap, we have the breadcrumbs kind of starting in Russia, and then it starts in the United States in New York. Then we have the two different schools. You mentioned Novastar was his name in the
the West Coast. Yeah, so you had two scenes. I shouldn't say schools. That's wrong. It's basically two scenes. You had like the East Coast and you had the West Coast. So you had people like the Golden Gate Knights, which are still in existence there. Alan Block is a friend, and he's been on the program a couple of times. I guess he's the Saber Legion champion right now. He runs the Golden Gate Knights. He was a student of Novastar's. Matt Corrado is his name, and they had their thing, and they were kind of pushing this the DVD. They had their own system choreography.
We're very quickly going from founders to present day people. You mentioned that it began in the early 2000s, but as far as I understand it, the major sabersmiths they didn't come about till the mid 2000s. So would you say that the sport started to arise even before we had these combat-ready?
Well, like I said, the FX sabers were a step in the right direction. The polycarbonate blades, I can't remember exactly when they came in, but they came in fairly early. I mean, they're not a far cry from the scrolling blades, but you had stuff like EL wire, which is used in like the Tron outfits now and stuff like that, in the blades and stuff like that. So the in-hilt polycarbonate blade. I don't want to misstep my words here, but I'm fairly sure it was Ultra Sabers who did it, and they were doing PVC hilts.
Yeah, I was about to say. I think the PVC hilts were the predecessors. It gets kind of tricky as far as I can tell. What was the granddaddy of those PVC hilts? Because as far as I can tell, there is a lot of mystery kind of surrounding the growth of the aftermarket and the sabersmiths to supply that aftermarket. It gets really muddy. I get different answers from different people I talk to. So yeah, I sympathize with you. It can get pretty confusing.
Yeah, I'm not like I said, I'm not exactly sure when those sabersmiths started popping up. My friend Todd, Darth Alice, he's been working for a while. So, I mean, they've been around for quite some time. It's not like they're not necessarily a very recent development. Ultra Sabers have been around for a very long time. I started by buying sabers at Ultra Sabers for my classes and stuff like that. When we appeared on the scene in 2012, it was, I want to say, almost entirely choreography. There was no real combat at all. You can sort of say that Ludo Sport at the time, which was just kind of beginning and stuff like that, and I know a couple of those guys, and we were friendly back in the day, but their type of combat is very showy, not very real combat oriented. It's not like HEMA.
You would say Ludosport compared to perhaps your own program is more stylistic, where yours is more martially based. Would that be fair?
I guess our program is a training program, so it can be applied to different things. You could apply it to Ludosport as easily as you could apply it to anything else. It's not that, so we're kind of in a different category. But what I'm saying is that when we came onto the scene, we brought in fencing masks and helmets and gloves and stuff, and actually hitting each other with full speed, full power, boom. That had not really been done before. People had played with certain things like foam covered boffers, that kind of thing, but nothing really. This is our kind of spiel, is nothing really gives you as much freedom and as much kind of realism as just putting on some gear, and so you can actually hit each other. And so when we came on the scene, there was like none of that. and we got derided quite heavily. And if you look back, I think I haven't deleted any of these posts, but I think if you look back on our YouTube page and some of our older videos, especially the ones with gear and stuff like that, there's a lot of talk about how bad using gear is, fencing helmets and stuff like that, because it makes you sloppy or something like that, or whatever. So the kind of thing that we have now, where we have TSL, which is doing these tournaments where they're in full armor and everything like that, that was unheard of when we showed up. People were like barely doing any kind of contact with each other.
That's really interesting. I didn't know there was a clear evolution path there. What I understood, each group kind of started on its own, and everyone just attacked it, with a different approach. And some people had helmets and some people had body armor, and, it all just kind of happened randomly. But you're saying it started, the sport started almost as a copy of the stage fighting that we see in the Star Wars movies. And then it's kind of slowly evolved into its own thing.
And that was our point. When we came on the scene and when we were seeing this stuff, our group, we'll go into that a little later, came from real martial arts and stuff like that. We were looking for cross sparring opportunities to go with different styles and stuff like this. And this offered a very good opportunity. Our goal was to get people to start groups like TSL and all these other groups, so that there were areas where you could actually fight. Because again, like I said, when we started, there was no place. It was like we were doing it, sure, and if your school happened to do it, okay, fine. But there was no movement, there was no real anything. And like I said, we got our fare of derision and criticism for using gear and all of that kind of thing. So it was one of those things. And that's the other thing you got to remember. All of these groups, whether they necessarily meant to or not, we're all coming from someplace else. There's nobody really invented this. As you can see, we can't even really tell where it really started. There are probably martial arts instructors who are Star Wars fans back in the 80s, back in the 90s. People that we've never even heard of, that nobody's ever talked about, that maybe did a couple of classes here or there, did something for fun. Who knows? Who knows? Like right now, what we've got, is we've got this very, very large community of people who are into the fighting aspect of it, both armored and unarmored. Like I said, Ludo Sport doesn't use any armor. They consider what they do fighting, but there's, obviously very little contact.
It is interesting how there is that duality, and if I can speculate a little bit, what might happen, because the lightsaber is tied so strongly to the tradition of the Jedi and so strongly to the movies, there may always be a contingent, a group that prefer it that way, prefer the more kind of showy stage performance type of fighting. And there may be different approaches, kind of like what you have in Western fencing, where you have, saber is very different from épée, and épée is very different from foil, but we all call it the same sport. Maybe we're seeing something like that, or maybe it'll all merge into something similar. It's really hard to tell. But personally, I'm a big fan of the duality of it all. I noticed on your website you share a philosophy of, hey, if you can use our materials, if you can use our stuff, to better yourself, to better your program, go for it. And I really appreciate that. I try to take the same approach on my own website. It's interesting to see the level of intensity people really want to put into it, or the level of being true to the lore people come with when they start the sport. So I don't know. I mean, some people I think would want it all to be standardized, but I think I kind of lean personally on the, hey, there's multiple camps here, and maybe there could be one big tent. I don't know. What do you think? But
there are definitely some pretty significant things that are on the horizon that are going to change, in my opinion, the landscape of the community in drastic ways.
We don't want to give it away. For people who are brand new to your channel, brand new to your program, I'd like you to walk us through the starting of your group and what your group is all about before we talk about the future of the sport. it's a high quality product. And so for people brand new, do you remember the year that you got started in
Yes,
particular?
yes. We started, Terra Prime started in 2012, in April of 2012. And I pretty much marked that with our first video upload to our channel. That being said, what TPLA is started in 2010. Me and my friend Matt, who is a HEMAist, I am a Chinese martial artist. We wanted to get together and we wanted to spar and we wanted to have a area or a arena in which multiple arts could come together, put away stylistic differences and stuff like that and just spar and see what goes, see what works. And, nothing existed at that time. It was before HEMA really got really huge. It was before the huge multitude of practice weapons like plastic and nylon fetters and all kinds of stuff like that. So we didn't have any practice weapons really that were good. People that were trying to do it were like using shinai and that kind of thing. When we found the lightsabers 2 years into our thing, and what we started was something called Sword Lab, which is still going today. We put some videos up under the title Sword Lab. I have a channel which is Sword Lab, which is kung fu and weapon stuff. But when we found the lightsabers and we started investigating them, we really found a perfect analog for what we wanted to do, because you could not only very radically change the size and dimensions of your weapon, the balance and the handling, but it was something that was a neutral ground. Like I could give a lightsaber to a HEMAist, I could give a lightsaber to a kendo guy and say, hey, go at it, and boom, there's no problem there. They're not using different practice weapons, they're not using different gear, all of that kind of thing. So it was a good neutral ground in our say. So that's where that was our idea. Now, when we came onto the scene, we noticed it was all choreography. It was mostly that kind of stuff, and there was a huge dearth of actual like tutorials, like people telling people what to do, good posture, good technique, good this, that, and the other. Basically, we wanted to provide that for people. Here's how you throw a proper strike. Here's how you throw this, that, and the other. And like we said, we're not exactly the authority. We're not trying to pretend that we're the end all and be all. But what we have, and what we started with, is me and Matt, who are from two different backgrounds, and we're putting our knowledge together. And we've added people throughout the years who have different knowledge bases and different skills and different perspectives and stuff like that. So now we have people who are involved in creating what we do, from arts as diverse as kung fu, kendo, kenjutsu. Those are kind of the same thing, but HEMA.
I'm sorry, you're gonna make a lot of enemies if you say those are all the same thing.
Well, and this is another thing that our thing is about. All swordplay is the same thing. It doesn't really matter what style you're doing. If you're using a two-handed sword, that two-handed sword is going to be used about the same way wherever you go, right? A German treatise is not giving you such radically different techniques than, say, a Japanese treatise. When you're using a tool, the tool is used in a certain way, and the shape of the tool and the utility of the tool is really what comes down to how it's being used. That kind of leads into the... Oh, go ahead.
Hey, I'm just saying, fair enough.
So that kind of transitions into where the lightsaber is really nice, because the lightsaber is a really good middle ground between all of everything, right? There is no other practice weapon that I can use that I can switch seamlessly between, say, a one-handed technique and a two-handed technique than with a lightsaber, just because it has a kind of very neutral shape, very neutral, feel, all of that, and the length and the weight are much more manageable than, say, steel weapons and that kind of thing. So these were all the things that we kind of put into what we were doing. And then through the years, our whole idea was we want to bring some sort of technique and some sort of awareness to these types of things, that there's something beyond just doing these movements than just kind of swinging in air, that there are body mechanics involved, that there's history involved, that there are, none of these things exist. We do the 7 forms and all of that, and those are very popular and all that. But those don't exist. Those are just literary devices. They don't really exist. And if you read the Jedi Path and all of that stuff, in my opinion, as a martial artist, they cannot exist. They're essentially they're lay people's ideas of what martial arts are, but they're not really what martial arts are. And so they're really great as something for a video game or something for a story. But when you start to put them into practice, if you want to go beyond just saying, okay, this move is this form and this move is this form, you have to start bringing something, something more meaningful into it.
I have noticed that you do have a lot of videos training in the Shicho form and the Makashi. So at some point, the art has influenced real life, or maybe real life has influenced the art. How did you, personally, how did your group wear these fictional forms into real techniques?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good point, because like I said, they're literary devices. They were never really intended to be any type of training guide or anything like that. They're just supposed to be good storytelling. Now, when we came onto the scene, what you had was mostly choreography. So take that as a grain of salt. But the way people approached most of the forms back then was that each form was like its own style, like its own art. Like Ataru was Kung Fu, and Shicho was Kendo, and Makashi was fencing, and stuff like that. We kind of wanted to challenge that a bit and be like, it's not really any of those things, and it's all of those things. Because whatever art you're doing, whatever thing you're doing, you have certain requirements that you have to do, right? You have to defend yourself. You have to be able to attack the other person in particular ways. And those things are going to be fairly, even through there. And so we came up and later on, we came up with our achievement system. But like at the very beginning, we started to lay out everything as a progression, so that rather than looking at Taru as totally different styles, totally different arts, is they're aspects of one thing. That doesn't mean that you can't specialize in one thing or the other. And this gave it a more organic feel, so that, like, if you look at the history of real martial arts, that's kind of how they go, right? And quite frankly, the 7 forms are laid out very historically accurately. Right, you start off with kind of military tactics. You get into dueling, defense, attack, and then you start getting into the sophistication of how you use those attacks and strategy. Then you start getting into the kind of harmonization of all of those things, and that's how we set up our system. So our Shicho is our foundation. It is the first pillar of our 4 pillars, which are Makashi, Soresu, Ataru. Those basics then give you Form 5, which gives you pretty much all of your technical ability. All of the combinations of the previous forms can be done in Form 5. Then you have Form 6, which is the harmonization of everything that you've kind of learned. So there's no real new content in that form. It's more just kind of like taking what you've learned and putting it together into a cohesive whole. And then our Form 7 is Transcendence, where we're basically learning how we can break the rules that we've spent all this time learning to our advantage. And that's sort of how regular martial arts goes. If you look at the sophistication of an art like something like Wing Chun, or even Taekwondo, which kind of went to the sport area. Both of those things, you start to get that specialization. You kind of go there. So it gives people who are kind of going through it the option, right? You get your foundation, and then you kind of go out and whichever area you really want. Our system right now that we have out there is based primarily on training instructors, people who want to teach. We are going to be starting to put out systems that are for people who want to fight and people who want to do choreography, specifically for those types of things. They don't need all of the stuff, right? They just need specific stuff.
And that's a good thing. You have uploaded quite a good amount of content. So your instruction, you worked with influences from Eastern styles, from Far East styles, from Western styles, and HEMA influences, and you upload your videos. And then you started to generate a pretty massive following. I wanted to ask you, when was the point that you could tell that you were really onto something?
Well, really, when I started uploading the first instructionals, which were the 3 strikes in Shicho. And if you go back onto our channel, those videos are still up there. And it was they're basically 3 videos which were just entirely on not on the different angles and the different this, that, and the other that you can do with strikes or whatever, but like how much power you're putting into it and how much control you have over to it. That's kind of how we kind of deviate those things. So those videos right there are pretty much the start of it. Once we started putting those up, people started, kind of going on. And it's just kind of been steadily going through lately. We slowed down lately. We pick up, of course, around the movies, obviously. But we tend to just go up. We hope that people will see us as an inclusive source. We do not make any judgments on how you're necessarily, if you're using our videos or whatever, how you're using it or anything like that. If you're wanting feedback from us and if you're wanting to be involved with us, we've got certain rules and regulations, all that kind of stuff, But if you're just working on your own, we hope that you're taking this stuff and you're finding value from it and that you're putting into practice. But yeah, what we have up there, I will tell you, is the tip of the iceberg. It's a Herculean task to get all of this content out. I mean, right now it's just, I'm pretty much the only guy creating content right now. So it's hard with my teaching and with my other responsibilities and stuff like that, to get those videos out. But we do have them kind of in sequence, ready to go, as it were.
I understand that. When you have a team, but a lot of the responsibilities fall on your shoulders, it's really hard to keep up an upload schedule. I can relate. I've heard from a couple of sources that the High Council structure of 3 people balancing all of the responsibilities from San Diego Sabers, I heard that's a good model to follow.
Yeah, well, it all, whatever works for you works for you. Everybody has their own challenges and stuff like that. I don't know exactly how to overcome a lot of this stuff. Right now, I can't pay nobody, so it's hard to demand things of people that you can't pay. So,
for sure, and you did have a bumpy start. You mentioned how people were critical of you using helmets, or I'm sorry, face masks and things like that.
That's to be expected, I think.
I noticed that you also do public classes where people can come in and see you in person.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I just taught today, yeah.
Well, very cool. I did want to ask you one more question before we jumped into the spoilers of those things that are coming on the horizon that you wanted to talk about. That has to do with all of these influences. You mentioned how there's a spike in interest when the Star Wars movies come out. Without a doubt, the sport represents a tremendous overlap between several different communities, from Star Wars fans, HEMA enthusiasts, practitioners in the religion of Jediism, and so on. So what do you think are the greatest influences to the sport today?
I don't know that there is a sport. There's a sport aspect of what we're doing, right? So like things like Ludo Sport and TSL, sporting, definitely.
Well, perhaps there are different versions of the sport.
Well, yeah, absolutely, yeah, and that's the thing. Everybody's got their own rule sets, all the tournaments, and everything like that. It's not like a game like tennis, where you have the same rules that exist for everybody.
Do you think, for example, that HEMA is becoming a bigger and bigger influence on many of our academies, and the way we teach and the way we run things is going to lean more toward that? Or do you think maybe it'll have more to do with keeping things more Jedi themed, and perhaps follow the mythology as it shifts and turns, in the future? What do you think is the more powerful influence at this point?
Really, it's the technology. People want to handle, use lightsaber. They want a glowing stick. They want it to go boom, boom, boom in front of them. And quite frankly, that's all most people really want out of this. And they will get it in spades. I mean, it's, you know, they'll get all this other stuff too. So, you know, really the influences that I think are going to be on here, yes, there's an influence that HEMA is having on there, because there are certain HEMA people who are into Star Wars who want to do this. Now they have a way to fight, you know, and everything like this. However, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you're going to talk about rule sets. There aren't really many HEMA-ish rule sets being used out there. We use one for the game The Headhunt, which is a very specific game that is sort of like that, but you don't normally see a lot of binding, a lot of wrestling, you know, the stuff that you would normally see in you know, in a sword fight. So you know, so there's that aspect of it too. What's the influence there? You know, there's a fencing influence, right? I know TSL doesn't allow barehanded techniques in there, so that's probably a fencing influence there. It certainly isn't HEMA. If people saw that one dude do that suplex on that guy at that one tournament recently, you know, I honestly have to say it's going to be the technology, because that's what's getting most of the people in here. The fact that we can buy a hilt that's really cool and, you know, we can hold and do all that stuff with it is a big thing.
It is really interesting that you bring up the technology. I didn't think about that off the top of my head because, well, there's just so many things to consider. But the market, as I understand it, is getting more and more cutthroat, more and more competitive every day as people develop, you know, better metalworking and better wiring to go into the hilt and things like that. So I'm curious. I really am curious to see how the better products on the market, how that is going to change how we approach these techniques, how we approach teaching, and how many more people will flood into the all of our different academies. That's an interesting point that you bring.
Well, it is going to be very interesting because you know, our lightsabers, which we consider to be so cool and you know, fancy and you know, and technological and stuff like that, are nothing more than, you know, dressed up flashlights. This is technology that has existed for decades. You could have built one of these easily in the 60s. You know, I mean, it's not crazy technology. It's just being used in very creative ways. The one thing that I think nobody is really talking about, people should be, is the advent of VR and AR video games. So augmented reality and virtual reality video games are going to completely change this community. It's going.
That's a wild
It's going to
idea.
change the entire. It's going to change the entire game.
What makes you say
But
that?
look, like I said, most of the people are only into it for the lightsabering, right? They're just like, ooh, lightsaber, boom, 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 right? Okay. They don't want to spend $100 on gear, right? They don't want to risk actual injury in a turn or
or $1,000, $1,000, $2,000. Like I've seen some really expensive
absolutely.
armor.
You know, you can go, you know, whatever. They don't want to spend $2,000 on a saber.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
When they can do.
Hey, but I don't know. Hey, I don't know. To be fair, some of those sabers, you know.
Hey, no, I have a Solus Hold Force Switch, which is one of those unicorns. You know, it's yes, I know. You know, there's going to be a certain market for it, and that market will continue and everything like that. But this huge surge that we're seeing in popularity, I think that we can't take for granted, because this technology is on the horizon. Disney has already patented their own version of it, which they're going to have at Galaxy Edge, probably all of their parks at some point. And how long do you think before they start marketing it out to the wider place? There's already a augmented reality virtual lightsaber game. There's the lightsaber Guitar Hero type game that you keep seeing.
Yeah, that everyone shares everywhere all the time.
That's what people want. People aren't going to want to freaking go through the rigors of a martial art just to play with a glow stick. They're going to want that. you know. So if we want to keep people interested in this freaking hobby, we need to come up with something that's going to be able to address that and is going to be able to incorporate that. Otherwise, it's, we're dinosaurs.
That really is a fascinating point. It's something to think about. To be devil's advocate, I do have to bring up that there are people who are simply, they really do love the martial arts part of it, and nothing can really beat the dance. Nothing can really beat the style of the aesthetic nature of fencing someone with a real physical blade. And in some ways, the combat-ready lightsaber, it's better than a real glowing plasma blade because, well, you can actually spar with it. You can actually hit people without cutting them in half. So there is a fascination there that I think we can't wave away. But I think you are right in one aspect. There is a chunk of our community, if we can call it a community. I know some people say that's a controversial term. I think there is a big slice that do come because they enjoy the glow, they enjoy the sounds, they enjoy the feel. And, you put a VR headset on them and, they get their kicks, and who are we to say that that's good or bad?
Well, it's like this. If you run a martial arts school, you have to understand that you're going to have a core number of students, which is going to be relatively few, but you're going to pay your bills based on your walk-ins, based on the things that the people that are going to come and go in and out. And I think somebody did a research article on this, and and I don't remember exactly where I read this, but it's like if you're running a martial arts school, maybe 70% of your people are going to go for 1 or 2 classes, and then they're going to disappear. And then you're going to have maybe 25% that will stay for like 6 months, and then you're going to have a very few left over which are going to go longer. And so, like, if you look at any of the really successful, and that's the other thing too, and we were talking about, I was at a conference, a kind of a meetup of martial arts scholars and stuff like that in Ithaca, and we were talking about that there's a huge paradigm shift in teaching martial arts, period, because of that, because of the McDojos, and because of that kind of idea of getting the populace and having a transient population coming through your school that's spending money, and that's how you're making your living and stuff like that. We're getting to the point where that's not a realistic model anymore.
And it's just to be a little nostalgic, it's kind of a shame because I have a lot of sympathy for people out there who are running their own dojos. And when I wrote my book, I put in the beginning, hey, if you have your own dojo, and you're putting together your own program, you can use everything in this book. Go for it, because it's true. They have to deal with those market pressures. They have to deal with a lot of things that people like me, my website, my academy, it's just 100% online. We don't do any in-person things, at least not yet. So, you're right. There really is a pressure there. And if we're going to look at the future of the sport, or the several sports that we're developing right now, we really can't miss those people on the ground, those local dojo masters who are really at the heart of everything. But are you suggesting that with a perhaps an implementation of a VR program that these dojo masters can stay afloat? What do you mean by bringing up VR?
Well, look, there was this video game on Xbox 360 which used that new camera thing. What was it called? The Kinects or something like that.
Yeah, I have a Star Wars Kinect, so
me and my buddy, my sparring partner, who was was a world Hapkido champion in 2010 and everything like that. So we're not unfamiliar with martial arts. We were playing this game, and the problem we were having was we were too fast for the camera. The camera couldn't pick up our movements, right? Like we throw a jab and it wouldn't do nothing. We were like, what's going on? And so through maneuvering and everything like that, we figured out, like, if we did like really showy movements like in forms, right? Like in Daolu or Kata or whatever you want to call them or anything like that, really big and, and it was able to do it. And so we were able to do these large kind of movements that were like directly from the forms. We didn't have to adapt them or anything like that. So there's going to be a difference between the virtual experience and the real experience. And I think what we have to do is we have to start acquainting ourselves with that difference and understanding, okay, what's going to work in what setting, right? That's another thing that we've been all about and we will be continuing to talk about on the channel is combat contexts. There's all kinds of different contexts of combat, like people look at a form and they say, oh, that would never work in combat. That's totally unrealistic. It's like, well, okay, if you were fighting one guy who was standing right in front of you, sure, that would be ridiculous, But if you were, fighting a guy with a long weapon and you're coming in there and you're turning around, sure, that's totally usable. If there's different contexts. A street fight is different than a sport fight. So that's what I said earlier when I said I don't think it's necessarily a sport. I think there's a sporting aspect to it. But I really think that sabering is becoming its own martial art, and it kind of like the only true, like the first true modern martial art, right? That is taking influences from kind of everything, putting them all together into this one thing that is based on a completely imaginary weapon, something that has never existed.
You remind me of, I think something that I read Guy Windsor say, and he's an author, he's a HEMA author, does a lot of fencing books, but where he talked about how there's like 4 different kinds of people that approach this. And I and Rich from Sin City Sabers, we were talking about this the other day too, where some people do come for the forms, some people do come for the martial art aspect of it. Some people come for the combat and the competitive side of it, where they want to get to the top of the leaderboard. And there's people who want to come for the history and the mythology and the philosophy behind it. And there's many different approaches. And I think you're tapping onto something here, Anonymous. I think what we all need to realize is that we have these different audiences. And we really need to do what it takes to make sure that everyone has a place when they come in. If someone wants to get really deeply philosophical or tap into those historical roots, we should have a place for them. If people just want to, wave the lightsaber and enjoy the novelty of being in a pseudo fight, we should have that too. These are some interesting points you're bringing up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things. It's me and Matt, who started with me, Vornok, to people who are following our channel, we would always say that it's like the lightsaber is almost more realistic in modern day than a sword, because I can walk around with a lightsaber relatively unaccosted, and if you attacked me, I could screw you up with it. I'm not going to kill you, but yeah. I'm definitely going to dissuade you from coming at me again. With a sword, I mean, you're going to be immediately, that. And it's. Do people have a relationship with swords anymore, even at all today? No. I mean, unless you're in the military, in say the Marines, where you're given a sword as a presentation,
As a lance corporal,
you probably have never held one, unless you're specifically into swords. It's just not. It's not like a tool that you would buy anymore. It's a specialty item.
Yeah. And that was one thing that really appealed to me when I started learning about the possibility of all these academies popping up and all these awesome YouTube videos with instruction and things. One of the first things that dawned on me, and of course I have to back up, my background is in teaching. I'm usually in front of a classroom with a bunch of students, and the thing that popped in my head was that, oh my gosh, all of this great martial legacy, all of this great sword legacy, all of these philosophies and movements that are now somewhat obscure, lost to history because we're no longer marching into a battlefield and we're no longer waving swords around to protect our honor or anything like that, I see these aftermarket combat-ready lightsabers, and I say, this is a great way to tap into a lot of those teachings, a lot of those movements, a lot of those forms and techniques that would otherwise just completely vanish. And I think we share that with the HEMA people, a love for that kind of history. And perhaps I'm sounding a little sappy and old right now, but that was the first thing that popped in my mind. And I thought, you know what? Studying these forms, I started out studying Kendo, Kenjutsu, and Aikido. It was fascinating to see these different stories of famous duelists, famous teachers, famous warriors who utilized these exact same techniques, and they overthrew kingdoms with this, and they completely, rose in status in society with these things. And these are the same techniques that I'm learning today. And I don't know about you, but that kind of stuff, I get a little sentimental about things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to feel connected to some sort of lineage or history, and all that kind of thing. It's one of those things, though, that I think is really misunderstood. And like swords are a mythical thing, and they've been a mythical thing for a very long time. Swords haven't been really a usable weapon of war for quite some time. You have like the specialty swords and like small swords and dueling swords and that kind of thing. But whole scale slaughter of human beings hasn't been done with swords in a very long time. Well, I'll give you an example. Like I'm very into and studying Ming Dynasty martial arts military texts, right? And there's a guy named Qi Jiguang who's very famous. And this is Ming Dynasty. So this is 1500s, 1600s, okay? Already they're making the argument that swords and melee weapons are useless when you have gunpowder, and that you should invest in cannons and guns. And that's how you should wage war. This is like I said, this is 1581, 1600. Already people, their generals going, why are we even bothering with these things? The fact that they're still around and everything like that speaks to something that's not specifically martial, I think, about this, even though it may have a root in martialist, but it's become a symbol. It's a thing. It's something that gives us an imagined thing to, like in Kung Fu. We imagine that these styles are so old, right? Most of them are probably, the way that we understand them, are probably only as old as the 1930s. They're not that old, but we give them this mystique because that's something that's important to us. Now, when you do it with a real martial art, you start actually screwing with real history. When you do it with a lightsaber, who cares? It's just fiction. You can create your own history to these things, right?
That's a really good point. There really is a blank canvas. And you and I have spent about an hour now. We've spent time trying to piece the steps of the development of the different programs that we teach and the history of the sport approach of using a lightsaber in different contexts. But you're right. There really is this mythology and meaningful symbolism behind the sword. I know we can wax poetic about the blank sheet that's in front of us of where we can take this. We could disagree with people listening or whatever about what this is. I like to call it a sport, but we do have this field in front of us, and we can take it in many directions. I want to know, Nonymous, your input, because I and a few other Academy leaders, we really would like to close the gap between our programs a little bit. We really would like to make our programs more accessible as people look at our different programs and transfer and things like that. What do you think people can do in my position? Dojo masters, academy leaders, group leaders, club leaders. What do you think we can do to make a better future for this sport, rather than lead it to divulge into chaos?
Share your stuff. Put it up. Don't keep it to yourself. Don't think that you got a cash cow. I'm sorry. It's not going to make you a fortune. Because if it does, guess who's coming for you? the mouse. All right, nobody's gonna let you make a fortune out of this shit. Okay, it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. So just put it out there. That's the most frustrating thing that I think that we've found throughout this time, that we've been going on since 2012. So we're going on 7 years here. We're going into our 7th year, which we've got a lot of stuff planned, because 7 is a big number. But why hasn't something else like us been out there? It's like, put your stuff out there. Ludo Sport keeps all their stuff behind a paywall, essentially. Maybe not a paywall, I don't know. But they don't have anything that I can find that is accessible that will actually get into the nitty-gritty of how their system works. People keep this stuff really close to the vest, and I think it's something that is a bad habit that we learn from martial arts that is not even necessarily true in martial arts, but it's something that is, that we think of, that, that kind of stuff. So yeah, put your stuff out there, put a video out there, put drills, put all kinds of stuff in there, start discussions, start talking about stuff.
Hey, bro, I'm with you 100% right there. I mean, I know my contribution on YouTube and my website and my book are small pebbles in the pond of all the content out there. But I agree with you. I think we're all better off when these ideas get shared. And I also believe that each of us as duelists, we benefit from hearing different ideas. We benefit from hearing different approaches. I think the worst thing you can do when you're learning sword techniques is to stick to just one isolated idea, one isolated program, and then say, okay, I'm ready for everything. Well, every opponent you face is going to be a mixed bag of tricks. They're not going to be trained the same way you were trained. They're not going to approach things the same way you approach things. And I think you can honestly learn something of value from every single other student. Now, even if they're not a master, they could be a newbie, they could be they can have sloppy form, what have you. But I honestly believe that the more you expose yourselves to ideas, the more you're able to see the flaws in your own training, your own, development so far, and you can become a better person for it. So I think that's some good advice. Get stuff out there.
Put yourself out there. It's hard because you get, obviously you get criticism. People throw stuff at you and whatever. Whatever. Dime a dozen. Especially nowadays. Quite frankly, if you don't have trolls, you're not doing nothing right.
That's pretty awesome. I might have to take that quote and put it at the beginning of my program or something, because that's pretty awesome.
Well, it's true. I mean, if you're not stepping on somebody's toes, maybe you're not really walking around. I don't know.
If you're not saying something that rubs maybe someone the wrong way, well, then you're not saying anything
right. Look, we all have different ideas, we all have different perspectives and stuff like that. So if you speak your mind and you speak your mind true, you're inevitably going to come up with somebody who's going to disagree with you, probably vehemently, right? They may take it personally, I don't know. It's happened to me a whole bunch, but it's par for the course. You have to weather that, and you just have to keep soldiering on. But you've got, I don't know, there's, like I said, we have people in our group who are martial arts scholars. Ben Junkins has written a book on the history of Wing Chun and everything like that, and he studies this lightsaber thing because it's this thing that has happened in martial arts that we see happening before our eyes now. It's like we see it going on. The thing that happened in Republican era China, or in the Meiji Restoration, or whatever period you're talking about, or something like that, where martial arts is taken into a totally new realm of societal importance or place. Whatever. Who knows what importance is nowadays, but that it becomes a social event. It becomes a thing. And even when this VR stuff and this AR stuff comes into thing, like I said, we have to be able to integrate with it, because that's going to be the community. You're going to want to meet your friends, on the battlefield and do your thing. That's who's not going to want to do that? Even we're going to want to do that. and we like the martial arts.
It's interesting. You describe the evolution of martial arts a lot like the evolution of language. No one really owns the English language, right? I mean, no one really can put a definitive stamp on, well, this is the right way, this is the wrong way, because it keeps growing, it keeps changing. A dictionary 10 years ago is not as useful as one that was printed yesterday. So I think as as our systems evolve and as the sport evolves, it takes on a life of its own, and it'll be interesting to see what that life is going to be. I am very optimistic. If I'm to give my 2 cents on the future of the sport, I think with the tools available to people, your training videos and your in-person training and the different resources there, all of the new lightsabers that are being developed with better technology that are more creative, more durable, more fit for purpose, and also tools that crazy people like me put up online that can connect people to different academies and to different sparring partners and stuff. I think it's going in a good direction. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of it. It blows me away when I hear from people who send me messages or send me emails and such, how enthusiastic they are and how much fun it is to get that saber. And then to go into their first spar, it's the craziest rush. I mean, I feel like if more people could have that first experience right there as someone who is honestly trying to, knock your saber out of the hand, score points against you, rough you up. When you're in that moment, in that tension, there really isn't anything like that, is there?
No, there isn't. But we got to remember, I would garner to say that the majority of the population finds that to be an unpleasant experience.
You're probably not wrong there. It's an absolute pleasure talking to you. We should probably wrap up soon. Do you have any last thoughts before I let you go?
Not really. We may have been in kind of a lull kind of lately because of certain things, but we do have a lot of stuff kind of planned for our seventh year. In our 7th year, coincidentally, is Star Wars Celebration, which is in Chicago, which is, of course, our backyard. I used to live in Chicago, so this is my hood. Please come down and see us. We will have. I'm trying to put up. I'm going to try to find a place to have a meetup, for TPLA and for sabering and all that kind of thing. We were at Celebration last year, and it was a fantastic time. So I can't recommend it enough. Please come to Chicago. Don't worry about not getting a hotel by McCormick Place, because McCormick Place is in the middle of nowhere. So get a hotel someplace you can have fun. But it'll be in our 7th year, because it will be April 7th, which will be our 7th year, and we will have definitely some stuff planned. We still have some workshops coming up this year, and we'll have more Sword Lab stuff coming too, because I'll be bringing my teacher, who's a pretty famous guy, in for some workshops as well. So stay tuned for all that.
I certainly wish you the best. My academy, the Rogue Saber Academy, the Duel Finder System, anything I can do to help you guys out, to help make sure that you have a productive and successful future and to spread the word, I really want to help out. Right now on my website, we're modifying it a bit to make it more like a social network for people who do what we do, for people who are looking for those academies nearby, and for people who are looking for online programs and things like that. So we want to support you 100%. So you just let us know what we can do for you.
Well,
okay?
Until we get we might get a Patreon going, but until that time, we pretty much depend on ad revenue off of YouTube. So share those videos. Anything that we put out, or anything that you want to share. That's how you can help us the most, is sharing those videos.
Awesome. Well, I'll do that. I'll link to your channel and a couple of my favorite videos down in the description. And that goes out to my previous guests too, all those leaders at Sin City Sabers and also Bendu Lightsaber Combat. Hey, you guys need a hand? I'm here to help you out. And I want to thank you one more time. You're going to give us a lot of street cred by coming on this program, so I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, I'm not going to take any blame for
that. Okay, well, you have a fantastic day. Good luck in Chicago, and I look forward to seeing you next video.
We'll see you then. Thank you for having me on.